We're about a month away from the MLB playoffs, and the Phillies still have their high hopes in mind. Unfortunately, they may be facing the one hurdle that they may be unable to clear ahead of the postseason stretch, as injuries seem to be catching up with this Phillies team. I'm going to break down the latest on each of the notable injuries on this Phillies roster, talk about how it impacts things, and particularly why my concern is so high with Bryce Harper and everything else with this Phillies team at the moment. Now, before I dive fully into things, I want to remind you guys to make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 84.8% of you guys tuning into the videos have not subscribed to the channel just yet. We are right near that 1,000 mark and want to get there before the playoffs start. So it helps us out a lot here. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and make sure you're showing your support. Now, to get into the topic of today, there's a lot going on from the injury standpoint for this Phillies team. This has not been an overnight situation this happened. There's gradually been more and more added to the docket. That we know a guy like Alec Boehm has been battling for a little bit. Bryce Harper has been battling for quite an extended period of time. Edmundo Sosa most recently hitting the injury report here, and JT Realmuto as well bouncing over and having some issues with a knee contusion here. Now, there's varying degrees of issues with each of these. That Sosa is obviously not a guy super make or break on the team. This also did allow them to pull up Seth Johnson, who did not look like the missing piece as the fifth starter. Another issue that does hang over this Phillies team's head, although I will note just 4 more starts required from that fifth starter spot until we get to this playoff push where he will be completely taken out of the rotation. Now, a couple other notes that I did want to pull up on the injury. The Alec Boehm update that I did want to give, officially diagnosed with a left hand strain. I do think the Phillies been a little bit strange in how they've gone about this. Kind of a bizarre looking injury when it did first occur for Boehm, that just straight up taking a swing and immediately grabbing his wrist after. They were checking him out right on the field. Ultimately, he did need to get pulled from that game, and we haven't seen him on the field since that point. Now, as far as the update that we have, no expected return date has been announced yet, and it said Boehm, who injured his left hand while swinging the bat on August 29th against the Braves, was placed on the injured list on September 6th, which, by the way, a little later than probably should have been the case, is they just kind of left him out of the lineup. But it goes on that it says, Boehm explained that it feels like, quote, like someone's got a hammer, and when I swing, they hit my hand with a hammer. Yeah, not a great sign there for overall optimism for when you come back. And I did want to note at the bottom of this injury list here, Austin Hayes with a kidney infection. And I do feel bad for Austin Hayes. This guy's been hit with one thing after another since he's come to this Phillies team. And to be perfectly honest, I think he's been just fine when he has been on the field. It's been unfortunate that he's battled injuries, although this Phillies team has drawn some criticism for that being its only move. And I did want to pull this quote up from Bleacher Report here that does acknowledge that specifically. I personally stood more so on the side of things that we just needed the big ticket players to produce like big ticket players for this team to return to the championship threats that we desire and expect them to be. And we have seen a little bit of that in the second half, but I would have liked if they did a little more at the deadline. Now, Kerry Miller of Bleacher Report believes that the Phillies wish they could have gone back and find a true center fielder. With a quote, "It's still baffling that Philadelphia's trade deadline solution to its outfield problem was trying to buy low on Austin Hayes. Hayes did hit a grand slam in what still ended up being a 12-inning loss to the Yankees, but he otherwise had just 1 RBI since his arrival on July 27th. If they don't want to start him in left, though, then they're right back to where they were before the deadline, with Johan Rojas' sub-600 OPS batting ninth and playing center field. If the Phillies had been the ones to swing a deal for Jazz Chisholm Jr., they'd probably be the World Series favorites right now." And while I understand this mindset, really where I think the larger discussion is the brutal situation with what the Phillies are facing. And at the top of that list being Bryce Harper. Now, we know what Bryce Harper is as a baseball player. There's no doubt about the talent that what he is, but there is some concern with the availability. And most specifically, a couple weeks ago, he had this quote breaking down, talking about his elbow and wrist injuries. And he said, quote, "I don't want to make excuses for what I do," Harper said. "You know what I'm saying? I've just got to go through it. Hopefully it gets better rather than getting worse. The wrist finally getting to the point where I feel like it's turning a corner. My elbow is just like there." Harper had Tommy John surgery on the right elbow following the 2022 World Series. He said this latest irritation isn't related to that. Quote, "It's not the ligament. It's in that area, but it's not the ligament. So that's a good thing." And while that is a good thing, that still means there's a significant issue there. Now, purely from the baseball perspective, with him at the plate, it has not been the same Bryce Harper. Still putting together good at bats, still making good contact, but there just is not that power that we expect from one of the world's best baseball players. That's just not in the bat. That he's hit a couple like long high flies that fly balls deep to center that just should be home runs when they're coming off a Bryce Harper bat. And they're just not right now. Now, where my bigger concern here is I don't know if we're going to be able to see this guy playing first base and playing in the field for the stretch. And what brought my mind to this, I will pull up the lineup yesterday that we had from this Phillies team here, and to go down it Kyle Schwarber leading off and playing left field after serving as a DH for just about the entirety of his time here. He did have to play left during the season in which Bryce was going through the Tommy John situation. I know they did make the World Series run there, but one of the biggest driving forces of optimism with this Phillies team is not having to do that. That if we want to call a spade, Kyle Schwarber not a great left fielder. I think he tries hard. I think he makes some plays. He's not as bad as I think some people talk about him. But when you have Nick Castellanos in right and Kyle Schwarber in left, the bottom line is you're not going to be a great defensive baseball team there. But to go down the lineup a little more, we still have Bryce Harper batting third in that DH spot. Again, he just does not have that same threat of power, which does cause some issues there. And where we really see this come into play, looking at the first and third baseman with these injuries, we're talking about Cody Clemens playing first base, who has been excellent since returning to this Phillies team. There does need to absolutely be a spot for him on the playoff roster there. And Weston Wilson at third. Now, I know that Alec Boehm will be coming back and surely filling one of the corner infield spots. I think it's more likely than not that he does return to the third base slot. But then you got to have a first baseman there. And then we're talking about how do you make this all work together? That's where the flexibility is kind of taken away with the Bryce Harper injury there. And just one note, it was Garcia behind the plate there because JT Realmuto is battling that injuries there. I will note that Rafael Marchand is on the injury report in AAA as well. So he was not available to be called up for this, although he looked very good during the early moments of the season, which he did get called up to get a little bit of opportunity there. But when thinking about the big picture vision of this Phillies team, I do think Bryce Harper deserves to be at the forefront of the conversation here. Because think about this. If this guy cannot play the field, if this elbow, wrist injury, whatever he's dealing with is significant enough that that's not going to be possible, then we are talking about Kyle Schwarber locking down that left field spot. Because Schwarber's bat is too important not to have in this Phillies lineup. We know this is a dude with 33 home runs, 93 RBIs, 97 walks in his 505 at-bats, not even mentioning the 126 hits there. The batting average never going to be high, but the on-base percentage and everything else that he does are huge for this team. We know how much it can swing when we get that first at-bat home run, a Schwarber to lead things off, and the tone that sets for this team. You got to find a way to keep him in the lineup, so that means you have to play him in left. And if that is what comes together, then all of a sudden we're talking about Johan Rojas being more necessary in center field, because that's when you really need that plus defender to make up for the corner spots. And to Rojas's credit, I think he has been mostly fine this year. He has not taken those noticeable strides forward with the bat that all of us hope, and the brutal reality is he likely won't. That on the season, 3 home runs, 30 RBIs, in 307 at-bats, he has just 12 walks and 75 hits, does have 23 stolen bases. The legs are absolutely legit, and he's going to track everything possible in the outfield. But is that enough on a team that desires to win the World Series? That's the question that I'm having some issues with. And the other squeeze that comes in here is the Brandon Marsh and Austin Hayes. What was the point of trading for an Austin Hayes now if you're not going to be able to use that guy in the lineup? And I don't think he's as much of a plus defender as you would like him to be to play center field there. He has done it in spurts, and it wouldn't shock me if the Phillies do experiment with this and go this direction. But I do think Rojas ends up being a guy that is necessary to this Phillies team in a way that if things were to shake out ideally, that just would not be the case. Hopefully, this is a non-factor and that Bryce Harper is able to step up on the field. You have a lot more lineup flexibility if that is the case, where you can keep Schwarber as the DH and then experiment with those outfield slots. But I do think the injuries are catching up to this Phillies team in a way that I really would prefer if that was not the case right now. Now, once again, we have less than a month until the playoffs start. We're about midway through September at this point. Not quite midway, but getting to that October crunch. This team has gotten through the long haul. It's about to be time to put the chips in the middle and fully see what this team measures up around the MLB's most elite. I feel okay about the state of the team right now. It's all about injuries and getting healthy. And my last note that I'll make here is if shutting down Bryce Harper until the playoffs meant you have a higher chance of him being capable of playing the field, you do it 10 times out of 10. But I don't care if Bryce is in your ear wanting to be on the field, whatever the case is be, that should be number one priority for this Phillies team, and every decision should be operated around how to get there. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. What is your level of concern for this Phillies injuries here? I will say mine is much higher than I would like it to be at this point in time, but still hopeful that this is a non-issue when push comes to shove and the playoffs do start. And once again, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. We got to get as many people on board the Phillies Digest family before this playoff push starts. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like, dropping your thoughts below, and I'll be talking with you next time. Peace.